So, whatever happened to probably the all-time greatest sci-fi movie in cinematic history, Forbidden Planet? Let's find out. Movies,
Music, and monsters.
Hey guys, Dan Monroe here talking about movies, music, and monsters. Guys, we are coming up on 100,000 subscribers in only 5 months. Absolutely unbelievable, and I want to, again, thank all of you for that. Oh man, buckle up guys, this is gonna be a good one. And maybe a little bit of a longer video than normal, but if any film deserves it, this is definitely the one. Once again, special thanks to the Robot Man himself, Fred Barton, for providing a ton of valuable photos and information that I now get to share with all of you guys. This is really cool. In the spring of 1979, the amazing sci-fi magazine Cinefantastic put out a glorious double issue all about Forbidden Planet. This particular issue has long been known to us die-hard sci-fi fans as the literal Bible about all things Forbidden Planet. And here is some really cool news. Cinefantastic is coming back. The new owners of the magazine are, even as we speak, working on a special project to bring all of the magazine's great past content to fans in a searchable database, and I'll keep everybody posted with new information as it becomes available, so definitely stay tuned for that. Okay, so here we go. Grab your subconscious monster from the id and let's dive in. This film not only comes in first on my personal list of favorite 1950s sci-fi films, but the movie itself actually had a huge number of firsts. Forbidden Planet was the very first science fiction movie to show human beings traveling in a ship that could literally go faster than the speed of light. It was also the very first movie ever to be set entirely on another planet in another solar system. This was also the very first time that a robot character was displayed on film as being more than just a mechanical tin can on legs, but displayed real human qualities with a distinct personality and, more importantly, being a major character in a Hollywood film. ROBBY the robot literally received star billing alongside all the other principal actors. Like the Lost in Space robot later in the 60s, the studio was actually trying to sell ROBBY to the public as a real robot, and the audiences pretty much bought it. I mean, come on, when has a movie prop ever received that kind of star status? You know, one thing that's kind of important to remember is that in the 1950s, prior to Forbidden Planet, most of the science fiction films being produced by other studios were, how do I put it, sort of low-budget monster movies. But this was really the first film in the science fiction genre that really made a substantial effort to take itself seriously with both the story and the look and feel of the film. I mean, this film was in color and widescreen. Pretty big deal in the mid-1950s.
Forbidden Planet is an amazing film. Some of the best science fiction touches on this idea of the great mysteries, the great enigmas, the things that we struggle to understand about ourselves, about our mortality, about our place in the universe.
Now, keep in mind, this film was not made for kids. I mean, yeah, the kids enjoyed the robot and the cool special effects, but there was always something much, much deeper within the confines of the story and the characters. Something that really set it apart from other films in the day. The director, Fred Wilcox, considered this a serious film and really demanded that both his production team and the actors respected that overall narrative of the film.
Fred Wilcox, who was the director, discussed the film with everybody working on it. And he said, this is a serious film. and treat it like that.
We all, as actors, made it a point from the very beginning to take the story seriously and to play it for real.
It's really interesting that even though Forbidden Planet was intended by MGM to be a superior science fiction movie, MGM still considered this a low-budget film. And this is why, unfortunately, Forbidden Planet was, at the time, considered a B movie. The preliminary budget for Forbidden Planet was only around $1 million, which was kind of like the dividing line between the cheaper films and the first-class A films. Now, Irving Bloch, who was a painter by profession, was one of the very first people in Hollywood to recognize that science fiction was going to be a new form of screen entertainment. It was Irving Bloch himself who initially suggested they use William Shakespeare's The Tempest, Bloch's favorite play, as the basis for their new story. The Tempest, Prospero, and his daughter became Morbius and Altera. The Enchanted Island became Planet Altair 4. The group of Italian nobles who visit the island became the officers and crew of the United States cruiser C-57D. The witch Caliban became the id monster, and Robbie the robot was based on Ariel, the spirit in the play, which was a master at creating illusions and casting magical spells. So, for those of you who think there wasn't much of a connection between Forbidden Planet and William Shakespeare's The Tempest, think again. In the spring of 1954, Bloch and Adler met with MGM producer Nicholas Nayfack and made the pitch for their story, Fatal Planet. Yep, Fatal Planet. Now, the original screenplay actually took place in the year 1976, and not on the planet Altair 4, but right here in our own solar system on Mercury. You know, it's really interesting that MGM really didn't do a lot of science fiction movies in the 1950s. Not because they didn't want to, they were simply waiting for the right script, a really good sci-fi story to bring to the silver screen. Pretty smart. And it was at that point that Fatal Planet became Forbidden Planet. The cast of this film was nothing less than truly spectacular. Walter Pidgeon and Francis Warren Stevens, Jack Kelly, and a very young Leslie Nielsen playing the straight man, this film actually being his Hollywood screen debut.
I was a stalwart, disciplined, obviously strong leading man who was dealing with this girl who did not know what her endowments actually were. And I did.
You know, having Walter Pidgeon on board, kind of like Alec Guinness in Star Wars, really let audiences at the time know that this movie was definitely taking itself seriously. Principal photography for Forbidden Planet took place from April 18th, 1955 to late May 1955. Like only 1 month. That is really hard to believe. The unbelievably amazing sets for this film were designed by Cedric Gibbons and Arthur Lonigan and built on enormous MGM sound stages at its Culver City film lot location. And believe it or not, every single shot of this entire movie was filmed indoors on sound stages. Now, there were 4 major sets constructed for the filming of Forbidden Planet. The first was the exterior desert with the bottom half of the full-size starship. The second was the interior of the starship. The third was the interior and exterior of Morbius's home. And the fourth was the interior Krell tunnel and Krell laboratory. You know, I always thought it was a marvelous way to show, or in this case, not show, the Krell. We never actually saw what the Krell looked like, but our imaginations as kids were allowed to run wild with the shapes of the doorways and the dialogue about the size of the heads while using all that Krell equipment. It allowed our imaginations to fill in the gaps. Imagination. Now there's something Hollywood could use a lot more of in 2024. Okay, the C-57D Starship. This right here is an enormous subject to discuss, and in the very near future, I'm going to do an extreme deep dive all about this ship because there was just too many versions and too much super cool information about it that it deserves its own episode, so stay tuned. This was the first time we ever saw humans from Earth flying around in a flying saucer. I never knew this before, but the design of the ship by the production team was literally influenced by the rash of UFO sightings bursting out all over the country at the time. The original screenplay called it, and I quote, "an object of polished metal shaped along the general lines of the planet Saturn." An enormous full-size mock-up of roughly 3/4 of the ship was constructed on a huge soundstage surrounded by an enormous cyclorama featuring the desert landscape of Altair 4.
They had built this spaceship, and it came down like a giant mushroom, and there was this pillar down the center, and it had to be 40 or 50 feet across up at the top.
When we as actors first walked in and they showed us the flying saucer and everything around us, we were extremely impressed by it. Loved it. Loved it.
And the beautiful green sky backdrop to this set was painted on framed muslin canvases at 40 feet high and 100 fricking feet wide. I mean, this thing was big. In total, and this is really unbelievable, the sets of Forbidden Planet occupied over 98,000 square feet of space on the largest sound stages at MGM. The largest miniature for the picture was the Krell ventilation shaft, which was filmed on stage 14 at MGM. This miniature shaft alone was about 8 feet square and 30 feet in length, built horizontally on its side. On one end was a perspective painting that gave the impression that the shaft descended down 7,800 levels. No matter how you cut it, this set, miniature or otherwise, was absolutely breathtaking. The flying saucer models were also filmed on stage 14 with an enormous starfield backdrop created by the scenic department. The backdrop was made of velvet and was 25 feet high and 63 feet long, with tiny little holes in it representing the starfield. It was then lit from behind with huge stage lights, and both the 20-inch and 44-inch models of the C-57D Starcruiser were filmed on this enormous backdrop. It's kind of funny. The art director, Arthur Lonigan, really wanted to make sure this picture looked extraordinary with the sets. So he sort of went ahead on his own and built about half of all of these enormous sets without actually checking with the budget department first. Well, when the financial guys finally found out what he was doing, it was just a little too late to stop, so they just kept on building. Obviously, there's no way to talk about Forbidden Planet without talking about, in my opinion, the true star of the film, Robbie the Robot.
In Forbidden Planet, which I saw in a theater, and I remember seeing it and not understanding it the first time I saw it, there was stuff for the child in me, like Robbie the Robot.
Robbie the Robot was designed as a kind of comic robot and a perfect 50s robot.
The importance of this character to the film from the perspective of the writer and the special effects team simply can't be understated. They knew that Robbie, being the most complex of all the mechanical props required to be created for the movie, if he didn't work, well, then they were in big trouble. Contrary to popular belief, ROBBY wasn't really designed by just one person. Irving Block and Buddy Gillespie both did concept drawings for the character, but it was Robert Kinoshita who took all of those drawings and sort of, melded them into one idea.
I remember that first day, the crew just stood around and looked at it and wondered, what the hell is this going to do? I designed it so that he can do practically anything.
Robert Kinoshita is also the genius who designed our beloved robot from the Lost in Space TV series 10 years later for Irwin Allen. I already did a video a few months ago about what happened to Robbie the Robot after filming. Check it out, link in the description. Now, Robbie the Robot back in 1956 cost approximately $125,000 to make, which, believe me, was an enormous amount of money to spend on any one individual prop for a film. And there was actually not one, but two different people who played Robbie the Robot. The first guy's name was Frankie Darrow, and unfortunately, old Frankie there had a bit of a, let's just say, an issue with the beverages and was fired pretty early on when he nearly fell over inside Robbie simply trying to walk. Frankie Carpenter then took over performing Robbie for the remainder of the film. There's absolutely no other way but to acknowledge the fact that after this film came out, Robbie the Robot was a true Hollywood star. This guy went on to do more movies and TV shows after the film was released than any of the human actors did. I mean, come on, he even appeared on Columbo. Pardon me there, ma'am, just one more thing. Have you seen my robot? The Robbie car and the tractor vehicle from the Starship were also constructed specifically for this film by the special effects team, and man, did they look cool. The costumes worn by Anne Francis were designed by costume designer Helen Rose, and this is really kind of hilarious. Her miniskirts were so short that Forbidden Planet was banned from being shown in Spain. Really? Spain? You got a bloody bullfight? Perfect! Miniskirts, get them out of here. Pretty cool. A lot of the costumes and props were used in a bunch of different episodes of The Twilight Zone. The full-size C-57D mock-up, as well as the various models of the ship, were featured in the episodes To Serve Man and On Thursday We Leave for Home. Monsters, John. Monsters from the id. Freud's theories on psychology was that there was an id between man's ego and the superego. And the id is where the primitive beast lives within each and every one of us, a monster, if you will. Again, I give the filmmakers so much credit that until the scene with the monster in the force field beams, they didn't show it to us.
The idea that Krell mined where something mysterious was going on, and to realize that creating this invisible monster, which of course finally destroyed its creator, Dr. Morbius, was way beyond what people were accepting in those days.
The awesome animated sequences of the id monster, which really scared the crap out of me as a kid, were created by veteran animator Joshua Mader, who was loaned out to MGM from Disney Studios. It's interesting, if you look really close at the animated id monster, it has a little tiny goatee beard, something I never really noticed when I was younger, but definitely draws the connection between the monster and Dr. Morbius. Now, a lot of people might think, and I certainly did, that the id monster was created with the classic technique of Disney cell animation. But that's not really the case. The artist simply sketched each frame of the entire sequence in black pencil on translucent vellum paper. Each individual page was then photographed in high contrast so that only the major details remained visible. Those images were then reversed in the negative and tinted red, which allowed for the effect of the id monster's body to remain pretty much invisible, with only the outlines illuminated from the force field beams. Old school filmmaking was so fricking awesome. Filming of principal photography for Forbidden Planet wrapped up on Friday, May 27th, 1955, after approximately only 39 days of filming. This was also the very first film in cinematic history in any genre to use an entirely electronic musical score. Lewis and B.B. Barron were hired by the studio to create all the electronic music for the film. You know, calling this type of musical score experimental would certainly be an understatement, and the studio executives understood that in the contract that they made with the Barons. According to the contract, if the studio, MGM, didn't use any of the music they created, they would get paid $5,000. However, and lucky for us musical soundtrack fans, all the music composed was used, and the Barons received $25,000 for their classic cinematic score. Incredibly, the Barons weren't eligible for any type of an Academy Award for this amazing soundtrack. In the end, the studio ultimately credited their film score simply as electronic tonalities. Wow, really? Now, most of the time when movies were made, there were what were called work prints of the film, normally only seen or used by the studio people, and in 99.9% of the time, these work prints are either thrown out or destroyed. However, in the case of Forbidden Planet, thankfully, they kept the work print, which was rediscovered in 1977. The work print was significantly longer than the final film we all saw in theaters, with both additional scenes and additional dialogue. According to Fred Barton, who has seen the work print a number of times, it was the editor, Ferris Webster, who sort of saved the film from a lot of its 1950s hokiness by trimming various heads and tails from the overly long scenes and just sort of tightening the film up a bit. Very similar to what Marcia Lucas did to Star Wars, which definitely saved that film. Okay, but what happened to all the really cool Forbidden Planet costumes and props? Back in 2015, a ton of original Forbidden Planet costumes and props hit the auction block, including this screen-used Hero laser rifle that sold for $66,000. That same year, a Hero laser pistol sold for exactly half that, but still a staggering $33,000. Just one of the original force field generator posts from the film sold for almost $20,000. Now, way back in 1970, MGM had a huge prop auction and a prop museum called Movie World Cars of the Stars bought not only ROBBY, but also a ton of other sets from Forbidden Planet. A very young Fred Barton sitting in the original ROBBY car, just dreaming about the day when he might be able to own his very own ROBBY the Robot. And man, did that dream ever come true. And check out these absolutely gorgeous photos of the original screen-used ROBBY car miniature, which luckily still does exist. The detail that went into these props and miniatures is just unbelievable. It is so cool to see the inner workings of how this stuff was actually made. There's even a hole in the bottom front of the miniature where I assume it was simply pulled with a wire across the set. Around the same time, both of the enormous Krell combination locks were also sold at auction. Then, in November of 2017, the original Robbie the Robot prop was auctioned off by Bonhams, and it sold for a staggering $5.3 million. It literally set a new record for Bonhams auctions, just surpassing the $4 million that one of the original Maltese Falcons brought in. And that, my friends, makes Robbie the Robot the most valuable film prop ever sold at any auction in history. How cool is that? But the buyer not only got Robbie, but also the huge control box that was used during filming that controlled every single one of Robbie's functions. Forbidden Planet opened in more than 100 different cities on March 23rd in CinemaScope, and some theaters even got to enjoy this fantastic film in true stereophonic sound, which, believe me, was a big deal back then. In August of 1956, when the film premiered at the Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, the theater actually used a second magnetic audio tape track similar to what you might hear today in Dolby Atmos, but absolutely no other film at the time got that kind of treatment. And what did the critics have to say back in the day? Well, the New York Times wrote, "If you sit down to watch this movie and you've got an ounce of taste for crazy humor, you'll have a barrel of fun." Really? Crazy humor? Not sure this reviewer was sitting in the right theater. The New Yorker called the film a pleasant spoof of all the moonstruck nonsense the movies have been dishing up about interstellar space. What freaking movie were these critics watching? Now, as far as the box office is concerned, believe it or not, and quite unfortunately, Forbidden Planet really didn't do very well. According to Variety's rankings, Forbidden Planet placed only 62 among 109 pictures with an estimated take of only $1.6 million. Basically, Forbidden Planet barely made back what it cost to produce it. The movie that made the most money that year, like it or hate it, was Earth versus the Flying Saucers, which was certainly a different type of science fiction film from Forbidden Planet, that's for sure. But the special effects team that worked on Forbidden Planet were nominated for an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. And in 2013, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, which it more than certainly was and still is. The American Film Institute nominated Forbidden Planet as one of its top 10 science fiction films in movie history, and even the score was finally nominated for AFI's top 100 soundtracks. In 1972, Forbidden Planet was re-released to movie theaters as one of MGM's kiddie matinee movies. Again, kiddies. I mean, who is in charge of promotion for this film? They did cut about 6 minutes out of the film, but man, that would have been super cool to see in theaters one more time. This is really kind of interesting. Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry often mentioned that Forbidden Planet was definitely an inspiration for Star Trek, hoping that Star Trek would stimulate our own thinking the way Forbidden Planet did. Well, Forbidden Planet came and Forbidden Planet went, but that certainly wasn't the end of this incredible film or its effect on not only us fans, but the entire sci-fi cinematic universe. Bizarre! I've never seen it, but apparently there was even a British musical called Return to Forbidden Planet, which won an Oliver Award for Best Musical of 1989. A musical! I got nothing. I really think the first time that I saw this movie was back in 1981 when MGM released the film on home video. God, VHS. Great at the time, but I certainly don't miss it. The Criterion Collection eventually reissued Forbidden Planet in the correct and original aspect ratio of 2:55.1 for the first time ever in a deluxe laser disc set with a ton of extra bonus features. Hey, call me crazy, but I loved laser discs back in the day. A movie on a shiny silver disc? Who could imagine? It did eventually come out on DVD in 1999 and in 2006. The same restoration artists at Warner Home Video that remastered The Wizard of Oz gave Forbidden Planet a much-deserved 2K restoration. But keep your eyes open. They have since vowed to release a 4K version of Forbidden Planet in the very near future, so watch out for that. The Blu-ray release also included The Invisible Boy and a ton of other special features co-produced by Fred Barton. So if you don't got it, what are you doing? Go get it! Okay, but what about all the reboots, remakes, and God help us reimaginings? Well, at one point, New Line Cinema developed a remake with James Cameron. In 2007, DreamWorks wanted to do the same thing. And in 2008, Warner Brothers reacquired the rights to the film and started thinking about their own remake. They even had a script written by Babylon 5's J. Michael Straczynski. This version even included the Bellerophon expedition, which would have been really cool, but sadly the script has never seen the light of day. So, in short, no remakes of Forbidden Planet, and thank Krell for that. It's just nice to let things that were great just leave them alone. Forbidden Planet was not only revolutionary with its incredible cast and special effects, but more importantly, it laid the groundwork for both studios and filmmakers to push the boundaries of science fiction writing and storytelling, influencing future movie makers like Lucas and Spielberg, paving the way for more incredible sci-fi classics like 2001: A Space Odyssey, Planet of the Apes, the Alien franchise, Star Wars, and so many more. We could be here all day, but that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I really hope you guys enjoyed that very deep dive into Forbidden Planet, and if you did and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig. As always, if anybody has any questions, drop them down in the comments and I will try my best to answer them for you. And please feel free to stop back anytime as we continue our conversation on movies, music, and monsters. Movies,
Music and monsters.